I'm Dave of Zippy Flies at Tailwater Outfitters, and today we're going to learn to tie the Furry Foam Mandaclawrian Crab. Okay, let's get started. To tie the Furry Foam Mandaclawrian Crab, we're going to start off with an Ahrex SA280 minnow hook in size 2, which is perfect for the size small Mandaclawrian crab part that we're going to use for this crab. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pair of pliers and I'm going to bend the hook eye up. This is going to help the crab to turn hook point up with the leader attached to it. So it's a pretty important step. Don't forget to do that. If you do, you can try to do it later when the crab's all done, but I promise you it's easier to do it right now. And just be careful you don't bend it too much because it can snap off if you get a little too aggressive there. All right, first thing we're gonna do is grab some thread. Particular type of thread is not all that important. This is 140 denier. I'm using tan because this crab that we're doing today is going to be kind of an all natural color, tan back, some tan, a little bit of brown in the legs, that sort of thing. And really I'm putting down a hook base here, or a base of thread, excuse me, to give glues, etc., something to bond to. All right, next I'm going to grab my claws, again size small. I took the liberty of coloring these in a little bit. I used some Copic markers. I like to hit the claws with some orange, a little red. I put some brown and some spots on it. When you look at these crab parts, you can see this has like little bumpy side indentations on it, and the other side is all perfectly smooth. Matter of fact, if you look down the spline there of the crab part, that's flat, but here you can see it's actually a little valley for the hook itself to rest in. So I will go ahead and position these claws now. So one of the things that I'm looking for when I do this is I want to leave a little bit of a space here to whip finish and get a weed guard in. So that's really one of my little checkpoints. I don't worry too much about the other side. So I'm going to just have my thread somewhere in the middle and pinch and hold this in place. And I'll put a couple wraps loose. If you crank down with your thread on this, the legs will splay out in all kinds of different directions and whatnot. So you don't have to go crazy. All right, so I got a couple there, and you can see even these back legs here, the little flippers, they're pushing up, they're not tied down yet, so you can see it will flex and move around. This material is very durable. It will flex and move some. If a fish bites it, everything's just gonna go right back to where it was. This isn't even tied in, so that's why it's being a little ill-tempered, if you will. Now, this has just been my general technique. When I get up here, this whole set of claws is not going anywhere. But what I like to do is I just do a couple, again, very light X-wraps. These claws are big, a big feature, you know, and they're probably gonna get, when it gets chewed on, go somewhere. But I like to lock it in a little bit. And you'll see right now, they're not tied in real hard. We're gonna have some glue and resin here that's gonna lock it in place. So this is all about just holding the claws and all these legs in the same place for when it's time to secure them. And again, back here, again, real light. If I crank on this, and maybe I'll do it real quick, you can see how much it's almost like spinning deer hair. So real light pressure, just to give you some control. And when I get a couple wraps, then I'll finish it off. So again, this is all flopping around. It's intended to be that way, and we'll just leave it as such. We're almost done with the tie proper. I could tie in a weed guard now, but the weed guard itself will be in the way as we tie this, so I'm actually going to whip finish this now. A little bit of a trick getting up and around by these flippers because I can't have that weed guard in the way. I've tried to do it that way, and again, I tie these pretty regularly for the shop. It makes a big difference. So our legs are moving around a bunch. If we wanted to, we could put some real thin UV resin and quote, lock them into place now. I don't do that at this stage. The next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna prep to put on our carapace in our eyes, and I'll show you how I do that. But before we do that, we're gonna use Furry Foam. And in my opinion, furry foam is almost a bit of a misnomer in that it is buoyant, but it's not like foam that you normally think of. Cuts really well with scissors. There are some specialty products like these fancy little cutters, right? This is a size small here, and I can just stamp out a number of these. The average person probably doesn't want to, spend a few bucks for this, but I use it a lot. So I figured I would just show you. Another option is get yourself a penny. Penny works well for this size crab, and you might need a dime, a nickel, or quarter, or whatever currency you have in your country. But all I did was I set this over the foam, pinched it, cut around to make a circle, and then from there, I trimmed this piece. So this would be the back of the crab, and I just put an angle up this way and an angle up this way. And I test fit it to make sure it's relatively symmetrical, but you can already see like that'll make a good little crab shape. So again, use a penny. There's some patterns out there that use like a bottle cap and other stuff. Whatever works for you is great, but that works really well for me. Again, for this crab, because it's on the smaller size, I've made these eyes. Just again, if you wanted to see a video specifically on that, I could make one. There are several out there on the internet, so I'd recommend just watch those. And you can see I've dipped these in kind of a hurry, but it's not going to matter for this pattern. The way that we're going to assemble this is we're going to use some glue. And again, we're going to use E6000. It's very flexible, dries real quick, strong bond, and all those things that we would need. And I'm going to go ahead and put a healthy dab right in the center for the carapace. And then I'm also going to squeeze just a little bit up by the claws and the first leg, claws and first leg. Now up by the claws and the first leg, the only reason I do that is for those eyes that we just talked about. And I'm just going to eyeball, there's a dad joke for you, where I'm putting these eyes. I apologize for that dad joke, that was pretty sad. And if I'm going to be off any dimension, it's easy for me to push them in later this way. But you can see they're just sitting there, they're kind of sloppily laid on. Then I've got my carapace that I just made. And I'll leave a little bit of space back by the hook eye for my weed guard. And I can see that my eyes are a little all over the place. So now is the time to kind of push them around. You can put in between these eyes a little, before you even tie in the legs, you could put a little bit like rabbit strip fur or something in there, give it a little motion. I usually do that for here in the shop. I'm not doing it here today. We're just going to go relatively basic. This particular crab is actually for the shop managers getting ready to go on a trip, and kind of requested that this style crab right here. So that's why I'm tying it like it is. So that looks pretty good. To get this really cured and held in position, one of the best ways to do it is I have one of these little clips that you get from you get a bag of potato chips and you're not done. They sell these at the supermarket. They actually make a great little pattern too that you could trim around that for trimming out a carapace. The only problem is the scissors. It's hard to get up and get the scissors all the way around. But what I like about these is I'll just come up, touch the bottom first, and then I'll take that off of my vise and I'll set that aside and let that cure. Even 10 minutes or something like that is plenty. And that's a great time to do a final check for make sure everything is looking pretty symmetrical and that we're happy with it. But yep, you can just set that on the table and let it do its thing. I'm gonna live dangerously today and just keep going, and we're gonna build the remainder of this fly without that. So there we go. It's looking pretty good, but you can see on the bottom here, what we're gonna do is we're gonna add a little bit of weight, and then we're gonna set these legs. These legs are all looking pretty flat. It looks okay, but that doesn't give me any control of the fly as it's falling down through the water column. So I have a little small gram scale that I got, and I'm gonna, again, for this crab, I like to tie crabs for our area here in the Tampa Bay area on the lighter side. Most of the spots that I'm fishing don't have a lot of flow that I need to pin this thing to the bottom. And the redfish here are just beyond spooky. It's almost like they're a different fish than the rest of the country, honestly. It's how it feels sometimes. But I just weighed out some tungsten putty. And I'll take that and I'll just roll it into a little ball. And not super critical, but I usually roll it into a kind of an oblong shape like that. What really is going to secure this, I know we're gonna cover it with some resin on the bottom of this fly, but I always like to make sure it's very well secured and also make sure it won't go anywhere while I'm building the fly. As you can see, I go ahead and just, the exact location isn't super critical. I just kind of go for dead center, and then there's not a lot here. I'm going to go ahead and push down to just flatten out this fly a little bit. That looks pretty solid. All right, next, we're going to cover the tungsten putty with some UV resin for two reasons. One, as I cover it and go around by the legs, I'm going to set the angle of these legs. But two is we're going to cover this putty. It will grab every bit of dust and dirt and anything you can imagine, dog hair, whatever, and stick to it. So we'll just get rid of that problem, you know, while we do this tie. But what I like to do is focus here on the front half of the crab first. We're just going to lay a bead of resin at the base of the tungsten onto the legs. We need to make sure we get that. And I'll get a little bit down in between the legs here for my the stem of this eye that I set. And I'll do the front half first. So I'll get started with that. Right up by the hook eye. And I'm not worried about the top yet. Maybe just get a tiny bit onto these claws and these legs, just a little bit on there. We don't want to go out and change the behavior of the claw. We want it to be able to collapse and move around as this crab gets eaten by a fish. So now, once I've got that, I'm going to go ahead and pull down quite a ways. It's like I'm past 45-degree angle deflection. Quickly set it. There we go. I'm going to stop this just a little quicker than I normally would because I just want to show what we've done here with this crab. You can see those claws. You see that? That's how it's going to fall through the water column. If it were this way, when this hit, it's going to go one way or the other, and it's going to seek out that shape and then fall through the bottom, even if I didn't put the tungsten on the bottom. Just with that alone and this leader on that angled hook is going to flip it over. So I use not this, but a Flexo Mutineer crab with no weight in the top step of my swimming pool at my house. And I just, without a leader, I just threw it. Real technical, I know. Just threw it at the top step. I did it 50 times, and every single time it landed hook point up, and it was only 8 inches deep. So it will flip over if constructed correctly. You might be thinking, like, do I really need this tungsten? And I'm going to repeat the steps here on the backside, guys. You know, you could use some other weights, you know, the things that you know and probably already have. I'll encourage you to just stick to the recipe. This has been proven and tested all across Australia, is where the Flatcraft is based. The owner doesn't just say, well, that looks good, that'll sell, and put it up for sale. He's got a group of, you know, inner circle of trust that is out there and testing these products so that when they put it up for sale, it, no kidding, works. So, and even if you don't understand this, hey, what makes it make the hook point come up every time, just press the I believe button and make at least a few following this recipe and this guidance. Because I think most fly tires are just naturally creative and you want to try other ways, but go with the standard, right? And then, you know, whatever issue you're trying to overcome or adjust or change, you know, that particular challenge, see if it works. Because, you know, the pre-established way is probably good enough. You know, I won't say for certain that it's going to be perfect for every situation, because absolutely we tailor flies to regions around the world. But you're probably going to be good to go doing it this way. So again, you can see that all of these crab legs are pointed up. Now my hook is a little crooked on there, but we're doing all right. I got one or two legs that are a little bit low, which I'll correct, and it's particularly one over here. But that guy is going to perform very, very well. The last thing that I'll do with this is I'll just restart my thread. You can probably guess already, I'm just going to put on a weed guard. Where this is being fished, it's going to definitely need it. I will wholeheartedly admit I don't like weed guards just because it's another thing to do. That's just me being lazy. Coming from somebody who ties a fair bit. At least for me, I tie quite a bit, I think, for the shop. And it's another thing to do when, you know, when you're making 20 of these or whatever. I'm just going to use some 20-pound hard mason. If you got a particular style of weed guard you like, then I recommend you do that. But I usually just kind of cut about a 3-inch piece, make a little notch. I'll bend it with my fingers, and then I'm going to go just around it, not real hard. Then I'll pull it up, especially with a crab pattern. You know, the bottom, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but you know, it's not nearly visible, particularly if you're tying one of these correctly. The only time the bottom will be visible is when it's in your fly box. The fish are never going to see it. So there we go. That is ready to rock and roll. Now I'll just trim this weed guard. I'm pretty happy with that. It looks nice. And I'll just put a little dab of resin for durability's sake. This is going off to a place where there's definitely going to be permit, so hopefully it's going to get crunched on. And that's going to be just the ticket. There's all sorts of ways. I call this the Furry Foam Mandaclawrian just because that's the material on the carapace. You could stack deer hair, you could stack EP. You could make a floating foam one, which we make a pass crab for here in Florida that tarpon and redfish have been just destroying. But yeah, there's all sorts of stuff that you could use for that. But that's the Mandaclawrian, Furry Foam Mandaclawrian, size small, and that will get it done.